1001 General. 1001.1 Scope. The provisions of Chapter 10 shall apply where required by Chapter 2 or where referenced by a requirement in this document. Advisory 1001.1 Scope. Unless otherwise modified or specifically addressed in Chapter 10, all other AD/AAG provisions apply to the design and construction of recreation facilities and elements. The provisions in Section 1001.1 apply wherever these elements are provided. For example, office buildings may contain a room with exercise equipment, to which these sections would apply. 1002 Amusement Rides. 1002.1 General. Amusement rides shall comply with 1002. Amusement rides, sections 234, 1002. Many newly designed or newly constructed amusement rides must be accessible and located on an accessible route to the ride. There are 4 types of rides that are not covered by the guidelines. However, other ADA requirements still apply. These rides must be on an accessible route and must provide appropriate clear space. The 4 types are: mobile or portable amusement rides, such as those in traveling carnivals, state and county fairs and festivals, do not need to comply. Mobile rides are available that provide wheelchair access, and other rides could provide transfer access with minor modifications. Rides that are controlled or operated by the rider, such as bumper cars and go-karts, are not required to comply with the guidelines, but an accessible route to the ride and turning space, 60-inch diameter circle or T-shaped turning space, in the load and unload area must be provided. This exception does not apply if patrons can merely cause the ride to make incidental movements, but otherwise have no control over the ride. Rides designed for children, assisted on and off by an adult, are only required to provide an accessible route to the ride and a turning space in the load and unload area. While the occasional adult user may ride, the exception applies only to those rides that are designed for children. Rides that do not have seats must only provide an accessible route to the load and unload areas and a turning space in the load and unload area. 1002 Amusement Rides, 1002.2 Accessible Routes, and 1002.3 Load and Unload Areas. Accessible routes serving amusement rides shall comply with Chapter 4. Exceptions: 1. In load or unload areas and on amusement rides, where compliance with 405.2 is not structurally or operationally feasible, ramp slope shall be permitted to be 1 to 8 maximum. 2. In load or unload areas and on amusement rides, handrails provided along walking surfaces, complying with 403, and required on ramps, complying with 405, shall not be required to comply with 505, where compliance is not structurally or operationally feasible. 1002 Amusement Rides. 1002.3 Load and Unload Areas. Advisory 1002.2 Accessible Routes Exception 1. Steeper slopes are permitted on accessible routes connecting the amusement ride in the load and unload position where it is structurally or operationally infeasible. In most cases, this will be limited to areas where the accessible route leads directly to the amusement ride and where there are space limitations on the ride, not the queue line. Where possible, the least possible slope should be used on the accessible route that serves the amusement ride. Signage. Signage must be provided at the entrance of the queue or waiting line for each accessible amusement ride to identify the type of access provided on the ride. For example, rides with wheelchair spaces or transfer rides. If the route to the accessible load area is different for persons with disabilities than for other riders, there must be signage indicating the location of the accessible load area so that riders can avoid unnecessary backtracking. 1002.3 Load and Unload Areas. A turning space complying with 304.2 and 304.3 shall be provided in load and unload areas.